Hey there. Thanks for taking the time to watch this. I have a couple of videos that I want you to see today. And the first one is Senator Rand Paul, and he is going to have a bit of a discussion with Dr. Anthony Fauci. He gets to talk to him at least one more time before that man retires in December. And also, I have Andy Biggs in the House of Representatives on the Judiciary Committee. And today they were having a markup hearing, and they were talking about trying to get these documents unredacted from the FBI that have to do with the Mar-a-Lago raid and just about everything else that the FBI does. But Andy Biggs really laid it out better than anybody could, I think. He really said it all in a very succinct, short amount of time. So I thought both of them were great videos, so I'll just give you a 2-for-1 special on this one. All right, enjoy. Like this video and subscribe too. Thanks.
But she's had the flu for 14 days. Should she get a flu shot?
Well, no. If she got the flu for 14 days, she's as protected as anybody can be, because the best vaccination is to get infected yourself.
And
So
she should not get it?
if she really has the flu, she definitely doesn't need a flu vaccine. If she really has the flu,
She should not get it again.
no, she doesn't need it, because it's the most potent vaccination is getting infected yourself.
This is an ongoing question, and we've had ever-evolving opinions from you, Dr. Fauci. Currently, antibody surveys show that 80% of children, approximately 80% of children, have had COVID, and yet there are no guidelines coming from you or anybody in the government to take into account their naturally acquired immunity. You seemed quite certain of yourself in 2004, but in 2022, there's a lot less certainty. One of the things that we also know after looking at this for 2 to 3 years is that the mortality from COVID is very similar, if not less, than influenza. So when we look at this, we wonder, why you seem to really embrace basic immunology back in 2004 and why you seem to reject it now.
Well, I don't reject basic immunology, Senator. And I have never denied that there is importance of the protection following infection. However, as we have said many times, and as has been validated by the authorization by the FDA through their committee and the recommendation by the CDC through their committee, that a vaccination following infection gives an added extra boost. And that film that you showed is really taken out of context. I believe that was when someone called in who had had a reaction to a vaccine and asked me through a telephone in the interview if they should get vaccinated again. So it was in the context of someone who had a reaction. And as a matter of fact, Reuters fact check looked at that and said, Fauci's 2004 comments do not contradict his pandemic stance.
Actually, words don't lie. If you look at the words behind me, we can go over them a little bit at a time. She doesn't need it because the most potent vaccination is getting infected yourself.
It is true. It is true, Senator. It is a very potent way to protect.
So when you're trying to tell us that kids need a third or a fourth vaccine, are you including the variability or the variable of previous infection in the studies? No, you're not. Because when you have approved vaccines in recent times, and the committees that have approved it for children don't report anything on hospitalization or death or transmission. They only report that if you give them the jab, they'll make antibodies. And you can give kids hundreds of jabs and they'll make antibodies every time, but that does not prove efficacy. So what you're doing is denying the very fundamental premise of immunology, that previous infection does provide some sort of immunity. It's not in any of your studies. Almost none of your studies from the CDC or from the government have the variable of whether or not you've been previously infected. So let's look at adults. I've had 3 infections. Should I get a fourth one? If you're going to measure whether I get a fourth one, you need a category that has a fourth one in it, and you need one that has nothing in it, no vaccine or the fourth vaccine. But you also need to know whether they've been infected. If you ignore whether they've been infected, you're ignoring a vaccine, basically. So you're ignoring a variable. So what you're giving us is you decry, and people decry vaccine hesitancy. It's coming from the gobbledygook that you give us. You're not paying attention to the science. The very basic science is that previous infection provides a level of immunity. If you ignore that in your studies, if you don't present that in your committees, you're not being truthful or honest with us.
Senator, if I might respond, I have never, ever denied fundamental immunology. In fact, I wrote the chapter in the textbook of medicine
Is it
on fundamental
any of the guidelines?
immunology.
Any of the guidelines for vaccines?
You know,
do any of the guidelines for vaccines from the government include previous infection as something to base your decision making on with vaccines? Do any of the guidelines involve previous infection? That's why you're ignoring previous infection, because it doesn't involve any of the guidelines. And furthermore, we've been asking you, and you refuse to answer, whether anybody on the vaccine committees gets royalties from the pharmaceutical companies. I asked you last time, and what was your response? We don't have to tell you.
Right.
We've demanded them through Freedom of Information Act, and what have you said? We're not going to tell you. But I tell you this, when we get in charge, we're going to change the rules, and you will have to divulge where you get your royalties from what companies, and if anybody in the committee has a conflict of interest, we're going to learn about it. I promise you that.
Mr. Chair, can I respond to that, please?
May.
Okay, there are two aspects for what you said. You keep saying you approve, you do this, you do that. The committees that give the approval are FDA through their advisory committee. The committees that recommend are CDC through their advisory committee. And you keep saying, I'm the one that's approving a vaccine based on certain data. So I don't really understand, with all due respect, Senator.
You're the one that said you would not reveal what companies gave you royalties, or what company gave the other scientists royalties.
Gotta move
That's
on.
what you told the committee.
Senator Paul,
Sir,
you gotta move on.
Could I?
But I just want to make sure we keep on time here.
Is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I do find it intriguing that we heard the chairman refer to Secretary of State Hillary Clinton, that somehow her having 30,000 classified emails at a server at home is really no big deal, even after she bleach-bitted and cleaned up her hard drive, and then they had him physically destroy any copies of that. Interesting, because that person is an officer not protected and liable to prosecution under the PRA. And then someone actually just made a comparison to the President of the United States with a Democrat staffer. I mean, how asinine is that? That's nuts. The PRA is pretty doggone clear. Who does it apply to? The government has to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that the accused is an officer, employee, contractor, or consultant of the U.S. But the case law is clear that the President of the United States is none of those. And when declassifying information, he does not have to go to any kind of specific procedure. That's the facts. That's the reality that you don't want to acknowledge. But then you move over, and let's start talking about this particular case here. Leaks after President Trump turned over 15 boxes. He turned over 15 boxes. Then there was the false leaks that we just heard talking about now about nuclear weapon and nuclear secrets being out. The FBI, more leaks, drip, drip, drip. On July 6th, a hard drive's given to the FBI. What happened then? More leaks from the FBI. Trump complied with a grand jury subpoena prior to the raid. New portions of this document, the affidavit, show that President Trump gave additional documents to the FBI, again before the raid, just like he gave on a July 6th hard drive given to the FBI, all before the raid, which is not a quiet operation. A raid's not a quiet operation. Show up with 30 agents, guns drawn, everybody's investigating everything. And guess what? The warrant itself violated the Fourth Amendment because the Fourth Amendment requires particularity of the location and what you are looking for. This basically said anything in this massive public accommodation, public housing that President Trump lived in, which is, I don't know how many rooms, dozens and dozens of rooms, subject to search for basically anything, for anything. That is a violation of the Fourth Amendment. But one of the great things that we've heard today is, hey, this is moot. This affidavit has already been released. Here's this page. Oh, it's all, wait a second, that's all redacted. How about this page? That's redacted. How about this page? Oh, my goodness, that's redacted as well. Let's keep going. Oh, goodness. How about this one? Redacted, 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 redacted. Oh, it's moot to ask for this. Redacted, redacted. The reality is you don't want the information because the information is going to reveal that the FBI does operate against political opponents, particularly under this administration. You have going back. This is new. This is breaking news. I don't know if you've seen it. Maybe you just missed it. This is recently breaking news that the FBI paid for Russian disinformation to frame Trump. That's all over the news. That just came out 2 or 3 days ago during his campaign. They weaponized the federal police bureaucracy in order to go after a political opponent. What does that sound like? Does that sound like the United States of America? No, that really doesn't. That's what's happening here. So when you look at it and you say, oh, come on now, this to say that the FBI or any other institution is weaponized, you just don't back the blue. Hey, we back the blue. That's why you're seeing in this coming forward more than 14 whistleblowers who say, you know what? Hey, the FBI has been weaponized for political purposes. You guys don't want to know it on the other side, but I sure would like to know it. I can't wait to hear them. And when we get the gavel back, they'll be in here and they'll be testifying and it'll all come out. You don't want it to come out today. That's why you oppose this resolution. Well, it's going to come out. I'll yield back.
Gentleman yields back.